Nvidia, you.
In this podcast, the CEO of Nvidia calls out doomer narratives as being unproductive.
What is the purpose of that narrative, and what are their intentions?
That's a great question. We should talk about it. But I'd also like to talk about your narrative of techno-accelerationism, where AI will inevitably solve global warming. Really? Jensen did this podcast last week, and I watched it since I've gotten an interest in big tech CEOs and their ideas after reading the CEO of Microsoft's New Year remarks. I watched the whole thing, and I found the same rhetorical strategy that Nadella uses, namely of portraying the increasing opposition to AI as wrong, superficial, and naive. Let's first talk about the doomer narrative. The interviewer states that a common theme of 2025 has been the proliferation of extreme standpoints, by which he means that the discursive landscape is becoming increasingly polarized. Either you're against something or either you're for it. This is his answer. It's extremely hurtful, and well-respected people have painted a doomer narrative.
End of the world narrative, science fiction narrative. And I appreciate that many of us grew up and enjoyed science fiction, but it's not helpful.
He then goes on to say that there are a lot of people in the government who obviously aren't as familiar with and as comfortable with the technology. And when PhDs of this and CEOs of that goes to governments and explain and describe these end-of-the-world scenarios,
extremely dystopian future, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of that narrative?
There's already a lot to unpack here. What I think is most prevalent is this dummification of the opposition. That's people who are critical of AI. His argument is that we don't know enough about AI, and therefore our criticism is simplistic and not grounded in reality. We just get our ideas from pop culture science fiction. I don't think that this is the case, but let's grant it. Let's say that me and you, but also well-respected CEOs and PhD don't know enough about AI to criticize it. Is it not your job then to show us that AI is not bad for the world, bad for the environment, and bad for people in general? You're absolutely right that I know very little about AI as compared to you and Nvidia. What I know, what we know, and what we experience is that computer component prices are rising. We know that big manufacturers are doubling down on AI, going away from the private consumer market. We know that large-scale data centers consume a disturbing amount of resources, both electricity and water. We know that our data is being used without consent to create these large language models. There are plenty of other aspects, but my point is this. If this is somehow a net positive for society, why are you not showing us that? Sure, it's great for shareholders, but they are a fraction of society, despite their power and influence. Please show us that we're wrong. Don't just say that our concerns are wrong and fictional. Tell us why these CEOs and PhDs that you brush off are wrong. Where is the immense societal benefit that you all talk about? That is to say, I think Jensen is guilty of exactly the charge that he's aiming against critics of AI. And towards the end of the podcast, he says,
when 90% of the messaging is all around the end of the world and doom and the pessimism, and I think we're scaring people.
We're scaring people from making the investments in AI that makes it safer, more functional, more productive, and more useful to society. Really? You think that 90% of criticism is doom and pessimism? His argument here is that this end-of-the-world thinking fosters fear in the populace, and that it is in fact this fear which prevents AI from becoming more safe, functional, and productive. In summary, I think that Jensen calls out critics of AI as being hyperbolical while doing exactly the same thing. He brushes off criticism that I find to be very relevant and real as being just fear-mongering and out of touch with reality. He also says that most criticism is directed towards OpenAI and chatbots, but AI is just much more than that, he thinks. I mean, he's correct in stating that right? But again, I think it's his responsibility to be transparent and let people know what AI has done and will do in different sectors like education or healthcare. The burden of proof is on his and his colleagues' side. It isn't us who should source that information. You should tell us. So even though I don't think it's right to call AI criticism dystopian, let's just listen to what he has to say about the energy consumption of AI. For I actually think that's quite dystopian. The interviewer asks about this aspect, and Jensen begins by endorsing Donald Trump and his slogan, "Drill, baby, drill." You know, that the US should extract more oil and gas. Yikes. He believes that it's a positive, as otherwise
We would have handed this industrial revolution to somebody else.
He then goes on to say, without industrial growth,
The nation can't be more prosperous. Without being more prosperous, we can't take care of domestic issues. We can't take care of social issues.
and so the fact of the matter is we need energy to grow. Is that really what large companies and billionaires have historically done? Social issues? Seriously? He continues to say that sustainable energy such as wind and solar just won't be enough.
Wind is not going to be enough. Solar is not going to be enough. Let's just all acknowledge that we'll take it. We'll take everything we can. Natural gas, is probably the only way to go forward.
But he prophesizes that this increase in demand for energy will drive innovation and foster prosperity, and in the end, he believes that the AI industry is driving all that sustainable energy industry.
SMRs
Building the
and
AI
permitting.
industry
Yeah.
is driving all of that sustainable energy industry.
This is a textbook example of what's called Techno-accelerationism. It's basically this philosophy of civilizational progress that says that capitalism is king and that technology will inevitably solve humanity's greatest challenges and problems. So even though the AI industry right now needs to rely on unsustainable energy and will do for some time, in the end it will all be for the better, as AI will solve the climate crisis. Wow, there's a lot more you can say about this theory, and I think you should read up on it. But what I wanted to say is I find it extremely dystopian. So in this regard, if it is in fact the future that we're headed towards, Jensen can rightfully call me a doomer. The final point here is, though, that Jensen dismisses criticism of AI because it supposedly perpetuates a narrative that isn't in touch with reality. But at the same time, he's admitting that AI will consume vast amounts of energy, unsustainable energy. And where we might disagree, or where I might disagree with Jensen, is the end state. I'm highly skeptical that AI will solve the climate crisis, among others. And he believes that to make an omelette, you need to break a few eggs. Those eggs apparently being the world that we live in. Damn. In the end, Jensen frames criticism of AI as pessimistic and obstructive, yet his own arguments rely on accepting significant environmental and social costs in the present for a promised future payoff. The tension is not between optimism and doom, but between accountability now and faith in technological solutions later. What I think remains unresolved is just why the public should bear those costs without clearer evidence that the benefits will extend beyond shareholders and industry leaders. Oh, okay, that was my short rant once again. If you like this content, consider checking out this video. There I talk about the consequences of AI slop, namely the loss of trust and authenticity. As an example, I use an AI creator who plagiarized and copied one of my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to Zeus, Justin, Yen, Afroaries, Cal, and Lester. You too can become a member of the channel, if it's financially responsible of you. Right now there are 2 tiers with different perks, but in addition to these, all members are invited to join a VIP channel in the Discord. Okay, bye.